The message came at 2:17 a.m. No name, no greeting. Just, "He's fading fast. If you still care, come now." I stared at the screen until the words blurred, wondering if this was another one of Lydia's games. Another way to remind me how far I'd fallen from the family orbit. But something about the phrasing, it didn't sound like her. It felt like a crack in the armor, a real voice slipping through. By noon the next day, I was standing in front of St. Alaric Medical Center, my childhood packed into a carry-on bag and a single photograph tucked between a notebook and my ID. The sky was that flat gray Midwestern kind of cold, just enough to remind you you're not welcome. Inside, the air was too clean, bleached, quiet, mechanical. I gave my name at the reception desk. The nurse glanced at her screen, blinked, then scrolled. "I'm sorry," she said. "You're not on the approved visitor list." For a second, I thought maybe she had the wrong file. I spelled it out again, first name, last. Her eyes didn't change. "But I'm his daughter." She gave me that careful hospital smile. "I'm going to need you to wait here." That's when I saw her. Lydia coming down the hallway in a crisp black coat, like she'd stepped out of a boardroom and into a funeral. No emotion, just calculation. She didn't flinch when she saw me, just sighed, like I was a mess she had already cleaned once. "I told them not to let you in," she said flatly. "He doesn't want to see you." And just like that, I knew. I wasn't just being erased. I already had been. I didn't fight her. Lydia was the kind of person who won by staying calm while everyone else lost their footing. She spoke with the weight of someone who always had the final word, the last login, the updated list. So I sat quietly in a plastic chair that faced a vending machine. I kept my eyes on the coffee cup in my hand, but I wasn't tasting anything. I told myself I wasn't here to argue. I just wanted to see him. To know if there was anything left of the man who once handed me a soldering iron at age 12 and said, "Real women don't wait for rescue, they wire their own escape." But now, he was somewhere beyond those double doors, fading into machines and silence. I stayed, for hours, long enough for nurses to rotate, for the receptionist to be replaced by someone younger, more distracted. Around 10 o'clock, the hallway lights dimmed slightly for overnight mode. The guard by the ICU bay stepped away to assist a patient transport. I didn't run, I just walked down the hall like I belonged, because part of me still did. The door to room 417 wasn't fully closed. The monitor beeped steady, slow. My father was almost unrecognizable in the bed, smaller, his once imposing hands curled inward slightly, his face pale and still. But his eyes opened when I stepped closer. Just a sliver. Just enough. His gaze moved to my face, not blank, not confused. He blinked like someone waking from a dream that had lasted too long. Then, almost imperceptibly, his hand lifted off the sheet. I reached out and took it, and for a moment neither of us said anything. Then he whispered, barely audible, rough like sandpaper, but clear. "Safe." I froze. That word hadn't touched air in over a decade. And then, like a crack of thunder, Lydia's voice broke through from behind. "You need to leave. Now." The monitor beeped faster. His grip tightened. She saw it too, and she didn't like it. I didn't move. Not right away. His fingers were still curled around mine, not strong, not forceful, but steady in a way that made me hesitate. Like letting go would mean giving Lydia what she wanted. Again, her heels echoed sharply as she crossed the threshold. I didn't need to look at her to feel the weight of her stare. She had that kind of presence, the kind that made every room feel smaller the moment she entered. But it wasn't elegance. It was pressure. "I said," she repeated, quieter this time, but no less sharp. "You need to leave." I slowly released his hand. The monitor calmed slightly. He didn't speak again, but he blinked once, deliberately, just as I turned away. It felt like a silent apology, or a warning, maybe both. In the hallway, Lydia walked beside me like a lawyer escorting a trespasser out of court. No scene, no yelling, just control, weaponized in its most polite form. We reached the waiting area, and that's when she turned to face me. Her voice lower now, more personal. You don't get to just show up and play devoted daughter after 8 years of silence. You walked out. You made your choice. I made a choice not to live someone else's life, I said, keeping my voice level. That's not the same as giving up. Her eyes narrowed just slightly. That was the first crack. You think you're here to fix something, she continued, but there's nothing left for you to fix. He's moved on. So has the company. So has the family. She leaned in close enough that no one else could hear and said it like a threat wrapped in silk. If you keep pushing, I'll make sure you regret it. Like before. Then she straightened, smoothed her coat, and walked away, leaving me standing there in the fluorescent quiet, feeling like a shadow of the person I used to be. Only this time, I wasn't leaving. And she knew it. I didn't go back to the motel that night. I stayed in the cafeteria until the vending machines powered down and the lights shifted into that dull overnight hue, the one that makes everything feel like a hospital dream you can't wake from. Lydia was gone by then, probably back in whatever high-rise condo she'd designed to look like power. It was nearly 2 a.m. when a nurse tapped my shoulder. She wasn't young. Her badge read Marta, and her eyes, kind, tired, deliberate, lingered on me for a moment longer than necessary, like she knew exactly who I was and how long I'd been waiting to be seen. Come with me, she said quietly. I have something for you. I followed her down a hallway I hadn't noticed earlier, past the patient rooms, past the break room where someone had left a half-finished crossword open on a tray. We stopped in a small administrative alcove. She reached into a locked drawer and handed me a worn leather notebook, the kind my father used to carry before digital files became the family gospel. He kept this by his bed, she said. Made me promise not to give it to anyone else. Not even her. I opened it slowly. The first pages were messy, lines half-written, notes about the company, reminders to pay someone named Terrence, sketches of old floor plans. But around the middle, the handwriting changed. It got slower, shakier, more personal. And there it was, a single sentence circled in red ink that bled faintly through the page beneath. If she ever comes back, protect her. She's the safe one. My throat closed. Marta watched me read it, then added, almost in a whisper. She told us to block your name from the contact list, had it flagged as non-essential. I looked down at the notebook again, my hands suddenly unsteady. So Lydia hadn't just taken my place. She tried to make sure I never existed. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I stared at the ceiling of a cheap motel room that smelled faintly of old air and lemon cleaner, the notebook still open beside me, turned to that line in red. I read it again and again, as if repetition would unlock something deeper. If she ever comes back, protect her. She's the safe one. That word again, safe. Spoken with his last ounce of strength, and scribbled here, circled like a warning. Or a will. By morning, my hands had stopped shaking. I packed the notebook carefully and made 2 digital scans, one saved to a cloud drive, one to an encrypted USB. If Lydia had erased me once, I wasn't going to give her the chance to do it again. I walked into the public records office just after they opened. The clerk didn't ask many questions, just directed me to a dusty terminal in the corner. The system was slow, the interface outdated, but the names were still there. Our family company, once a clean, legacy-driven business, looked different now. On paper, Lydia hadn't just stepped in after I left. She'd made moves. Quiet ones. 3 things stood out almost immediately. First, a sequence of duplicated expense reports. Same vendor, same invoice number, billed twice 6 weeks apart. Second, a sudden transfer of board proxy rights. 4 names that used to report to my father had shifted under Lydia's control last year. And third, a signature dated just a month ago. My father's name. Flowing. confident, but I knew his hand had been trembling since February. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I printed copies and sent backups to a secure folder, whatever Lydia was doing. She hadn't covered her tracks as well as she thought, and something told me this was only the surface. Because when people get away with rewriting the past, they start thinking they can write the future too. And this time, I'd be ready to stop her. By the time I returned to the hospital, something had changed. The nurses who used to nod politely now kept their eyes on clipboards. Conversations paused when I stepped into the corridor. Marta still gave me a quiet smile, but even she looked uneasy, like someone had turned up the heat and told her not to sweat. I didn't need to ask what was happening. Lydia moved quickly when she felt threatened, and now I was a threat. It didn't take long to hear the first whisper, a volunteer by the elevator, on the phone with someone. I only caught part of it. Pretending she cares after all these years, probably wants a piece of it before he goes. Then came the second, a cousin I hadn't seen since college, arriving with a casserole and a fresh blowout. She hugged Lydia and walked right past me. No eye contact, no hello. And the third, well, the third was loud enough that it was meant for me. "She's just here for the money," Lydia said to a cluster of family friends gathered near the lounge, her tone wrapped in faux concern. It's sad, really, the way grief brings out opportunists. No one challenged her, not even the ones who should have known better. But someone did slip me a flash drive that evening. Michael, a cousin from the finance side. Quiet, careful, loyal to no one. He slid it across the armrest without looking at me and muttered, "I didn't see anything, but you might want to." Inside the file were internal reports, uneven transfers, missing approval chains. Names I recognized, numbers that didn't add up. And that night Marta pulled me aside again. "I checked his dosage records," she whispered. "They don't match the physician's orders. Someone changed them." That was the moment I stopped wondering if Lydia had gone too far, because now it wasn't just about inheritance or legacy. She wasn't just erasing me, she was accelerating his end. I hadn't stepped inside the estate in nearly a decade. The iron gate still creaked the same way, but the landscaping had changed, cleaner, colder. Like someone had edited out everything that made it a home and replaced it with something curated for photographs. The front door recognized the code. Lydia never changed it, and that told me everything I needed to know about how invincible she believed she was. Inside, the walls were repainted in ash gray and pearl white. The scent of furniture polish clung to the air, but the silence was louder. Gone were the photographs of childhood birthdays, the antique clock that once chimed at uneven intervals, the faded art projects clipped to the fridge like they mattered. I climbed the stairs and walked into my old room. It was technically still mine, though it had been stripped of softness and replaced with neutral decor, like a guest room no one expected to use. But one thing remained. On the closet's top shelf, shoved behind a stack of holiday linens, sat the old Sony camcorder. Dusty, untouched, labeled in my father's handwriting. Safe harbor, age 13. I charged it in the hallway, sitting on the floor like a child again. When it flickered on, I skipped past old birthday songs, science fairs, shaky footage of me trying to ride a bike with one hand. Then I found it. The angle was strange, probably left recording by accident, but the audio was clear. My father's voice, low and unguarded. "She's the one," he said. "This one carries my legacy, whether she wants it or not." He wasn't talking to the camera. He was talking to someone off screen. Maybe Lydia, maybe himself. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that he'd said it out loud. Back then, before the silence, before the lies. And that tape had captured the one thing Lydia could never delete. Proof. He passed at 4:32 a.m. The nurse didn't have to say anything. I was already standing in the hallway, watching the monitors slow, then still. Marta touched my arm gently, but I didn't move. I just stared at the quiet glow of the room behind the glass. Something inside me settled. Not peace, not grief, but something heavier. Final. Lydia called the family meeting 3 hours later. The estate's formal lounge had always felt more like a gallery than a living room. Glass walls, leather chairs, a bar no one ever used. Everyone was already seated when I walked in. Lydia stood at the head of the room, hands folded like a woman about to accept an award she'd written for herself. "I know this is a difficult moment," she began, her tone wrapped in false reverence. "But as executor of our father's estate, I'll be reviewing the terms of his will and—" A door creaked open at the back. Mr. Kessler, our father's longtime attorney, stepped inside. Gray suit, no smile, a file in one hand and something small in the other. "There's been a change," he said calmly. "A supplemental directive. Dated, witnessed, and filed independently." Lydia's face didn't change, but her posture did. Just slightly. Just enough for me to see it. "There's also a video," he added. Someone turned off the lights. The screen lit up, and there he was. My father, seated in his armchair, the same cardigan, the same living room window glowing behind him. "If Claire returns before I die," he said slowly, voice steady, "know this. She is my rightful successor. Lydia forged documents behind my back. I've corrected what I can. I leave everything in Claire's care." Silence followed. Not the awkward kind. The kind that says nothing will ever be the same again. And in that moment, no one looked at Lydia. They were all looking at me. Lydia didn't speak. For the first time since I arrived, she had nothing rehearsed, nothing weaponized in her tone. She just stood there, frozen in the half-light of the projector screen, like a portrait of someone who just realized the walls were made of glass. A few relatives stood. A cousin excused herself in a whisper. Someone else followed. No one dared to make eye contact with her, and no one looked at me with pity anymore. That was gone. Mr. Kessler stepped forward, holding the same thick envelope he'd entered with. He placed it gently on the coffee table between us, his voice steady but firm. "This," he said, "is the override directive, signed 3 months ago, witnessed by 2 outside parties, notarized. He knew what he was doing, and he made sure no one could undo it." I didn't reach for it. Not yet.
He turned to Lydia next, professional, unflinching. "You were never granted legal executor status. The earlier documents you submitted are under review for forgery. Any attempt to act on them moving forward will be considered a breach." Still, she said nothing. And then Kessler did something small, but irreversible. He pulled out the leather notebook, the one Marta had slipped into my hands, the red circle still visible on the page. He flipped it open, tapped the line, and said, "His handwriting. Verified. Independent analysis confirms it. Dated in accordance with his medical evaluations. There's no ambiguity here." I finally stepped forward, picked up the envelope, and slipped it into my bag. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I didn't need to, because the silence wasn't mine to carry anymore. For the first time in years, the truth wasn't something I had to defend. It was something that stood on its own. And Lydia, who once rewrote the story, had finally lost control of the ending. 3 days after the meeting, 2 men in plain suits showed up at the estate office. No drama, just credentials, a clipboard, and calm authority. They introduced themselves as investigators from the Department of Finance and Legal Compliance. Their questions weren't vague. They knew what they were looking for. The office staff looked stunned. One assistant made the mistake of texting Lydia mid-interview. She showed up 20 minutes later, heels sharp, face colder than usual. But this time, her words didn't land. The men weren't here to listen. They were here to document. The next day, a formal notice arrived, a court-issued freeze order. All of Lydia's accounts, personal, corporate, discretionary, locked, access revoked, immediate audit initiated. The memo was clear: suspected forgery, financial manipulation, and breach of fiduciary duty. It turned out the forged documents in my father's name weren't isolated. Lydia had used similar tactics in high-risk investments, falsifying board approvals and backdating electronic signatures. Transactions that had once slipped through the cracks now formed a paper trail, a clean one, leading straight to her. The company released a public statement within 48 hours. Lydia was being removed from all corporate authority pending investigation. Her name disappeared from the leadership page like it had never been there. Just a blank space where control used to live.
I didn't attend the emergency board meeting. I didn't need to, because this part wasn't mine to fight. This was the part where the truth spoke for itself. And for all the years I'd spent being erased, dismissed, rewritten, now, it was Lydia's version of reality that was falling apart. She hadn't just lost the estate. She'd lost the illusion that no one could touch her. And this time, she wasn't walking away clean. I didn't throw a party. There was no celebration, no triumphant headline or victory toast. Instead, I walked back into the hospital wing where it all began, not as a visitor desperate for approval, but as someone carrying the weight of something real. I met with the hospice director and quietly arranged to allocate a portion of the estate to long-term patient care, staff support, therapy funding, new beds. No press release, just a signature, just a name returned to where it once belonged. On my way out, a janitor passed me in the hallway, gray hair, soft eyes. He looked familiar, though I couldn't place him until he stopped beside the vending machine and said, without prompting, "He never stopped talking about you, you know, just quietly." And then he nodded, like that explained everything. And in a way it did. It was a clear morning when I visited the cemetery. No wind, just the soft rustle of leaves overhead and the low hum of traffic in the distance. The stone was simple, his name, his years, nothing flowery, just how he would have wanted it. I sat beside it for a while, saying nothing. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out two things, the notebook and the old camcorder labeled Safe Harbor. I placed them gently at the base of the headstone, weatherproofed, sealed, meant not to last forever, but long enough. Then I set a small record player beside me and let the static crackle for a moment before Ella Fitzgerald's voice filled the air. Summertime, his favorite. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. But as the song drifted upward, I let the voiceover take its place, because some endings are meant to be spoken only once. They said I left him, but he always knew. I wasn't the one who walked away. I was the safe one. And this time, there was no one left to rewrite that truth.